भज मन राधे 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 गोविंदा भज मन राधे 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 गोविंदा भज मन राधे राधे तीर विहारी भज मन यमुना तीर विहारी भज मन यमुना तीर विहारी भज मन यमुना तीर विहारी भज मन राधा चेतोहारी मन राधा चेतोहारी भज मन राधा चेतोहारी भज मन राधा चेतोहारी भज मन राधे 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 गोविंदा भज मन राधे 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 गोविंदा भज मन राधे 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 गोविंदा भज मन राधे 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 गोविंदा भज मन राधे गोविंदा मन राधे गोविंदा भज मन गोवर्धन गिरिधारी भज मन गोवर्धन गिरिधारी भज मन वृंदावन संचारी भज मन वृंदावन संचारी भज मन यमुना तीर विहारी भज मन यमुना तीर विहारी भज मन राधा चेतोहारी भज मन राधा चेतोहारी भज मन राधे 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 गोविंदा भज मन राधे 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 गोविंदा भज मन राधे 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 गोविंदा भज मन राधे 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 गोविंदा भज मन राधे गोविंदा मन राधे गोविंदा भज मन राधे गोविंदा मन राधे गोविंदा भज मन राधे गोविंदा बोलिए राधा और कृष्णचंद्र भगवान की जय सद्गुरुनाथ महाराज की जय। श्री कृष्ण शरणं मम 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 श्री कृष्ण शरणं मम
Hari Om. Can you all see me and hear me clearly? Awesome. Okay. There has been a long break, and we are coming back from that break. Hope and pray that all of you are doing well, and I am definitely eager to get back to this routine. It's good to see all of you here. Nice participation. So we will start with a small invocation, and then I will ask Hari Chaitanya to lead us with today's two shlokas along with the invocation of Atmabodha, 21st and 22nd shloka. So then Divya will give her explanation. After Brahmacharani Divya gives, it will be Brahmachari Hari Chaitanya. So that is how we will proceed. And let's get going. Let's start with the prayer. ॐ सहनाववतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यङ्करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै ॐ शान्तिः 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 गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णुः गुरुर्देवो महेश्वरः गुरुरेव परं ब्रह्म तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः. Welcome to this Atmabodha class. Can we Hari Garu?
21 and 22.
Yes, sir.
Dehendriyaguṇānkarmāṇi.
Hari, first invocation and then the first.
I've been out of it for a while.
We all are.
Tapobhikshīna pāpānām shāntānām vītarāgiṇām mumukshūnām apekshyoyam ātmabodho vidhīyate. Dehendriyaguṇānkarmāṇi.
देहेन्द्रियगुणान्
Amale saccidātmani.
अमले सच्चिदात्मनि
adhyasyantyavivekena.
adhyasyantyavivekena
Gagane nīlatādivat.
gagane nīlatādivat
ajñānānmānasopādheḥ.
ajñānānmānasopādheḥ
kartṛtvādīni cātmani.
kartṛtvādīni cātmani
kalpyante'mbugate candre.
kalpyante'mbugate candre
calanādi yathāmbhasaḥ.
calanādi yathāmbhasaḥ. Thank you, Hari. Now let's give room to Go for it.
Can you hear me well? Excellent. So since it's been a while, it's worth revisiting the bird's eye view of ātmabodha before we dive into verse 21 and 22. So again, ātmabodha is a prakarana grantha that introduces us to the fundamental principles and basic logical analysis in Vedanta. So we began with the declaration that jnana is the only way to moksha, and all other means can prepare the mind, but the only way to remove ajñāna is with jnana, just as light is the only solution for darkness. Then we must understand that the world jagat is impermanent and therefore unreal, mithya. Okay, what about me, the individual? The attributes of the upadhis are superimposed on the attributeless Atman. And because of the identification with the upadhis, I say, I am these three bodies. Upadhis are the ones with the different qualities and functionalities, not Atman. So we saw that Atman is the sakshi, like the presence of the king. Atma is the chit that lends its vitality to the upadhis that live in them. But this relationship between the upadhis and the substratums are mixed up because of aviveka and ajñāna. So this brings us to verse 21 and 22. So dehendriyaguṇānkarmāṇyamale saccidātmani adhyasyantyavivekena gagane nīlatādivat. Adhyasyanti, we superimpose the guna and karma of deha and indriya on the atma, which is amale, sat, and chit. And how do we do that? By avivekena, by non-discrimination. So adhyasyanti, the superimposition, lasts as long as there is aviveka. I don't think deeper about myself and continuously make the fundamental mistake that I do, I feel, I think. I take myself to be the BMI and not as the self. This axiom is baffling and hard to swallow because it's hard to accept that I am delusional. It's a sore punch to the ego. And sometimes we tend to push it away like, yeah, this is high philosophy. And we don't take it to be that it's actual deep self-criticism. So we may argue sometimes, what do you mean I'm not me, right? The experience I have of being me is real. When I act, when I express my qualities, that's clear evidence of my existence. So the analogy is given, the analogy of the blue sky, is there to dissolve that logic that experiencing is a pramana of existence. Seeing is not believing. So just as the blue color, nīlatādivat, is superimposed on the sky, gagane. Even though we all see the sky as blue, we understand that the sky does not have color. So I can experience one thing and know that the truth is something else, and they don't invalidate each other. In the same way, everything I experience about my whole personality is experienced, but it doesn't negate the truth that I am not this deha, indriya, or its karma or guna. I am amale, sat, chit, atma. Now we come to verse 22. Ajñānānmānasopādheḥ kartṛtvādīni cātmani kalpyante'mbugate candre calanādi yathāmbhasaḥ. So at first, 21 and 22 look like they're repeating the same idea, right? And we have to remember, our gurus never waste words. So we need to pay attention to the changes in the words to grasp the nuances. In 21, it's given deha indriya, or its karma and guna, meaning that they're referring to the gross body that is superimposed on Atman. Now in verse 22, we go to the next layer. We see manasa upadheḥ, the mind upadhi, and its kartṛtvādīni, doership, kalpyante'mbugate, ātmani. It's imagined on the self. Because the gross body is more tangible, it's easier to correct the tendency we have to identify with it. For example, if I'm deaf, I know it's because of the ears that are defective. If I'm short, well, what can I do? I just inherited these genes, right? But it becomes harder to separate the manasa upadhi, especially that kartṛtvādīni. Now that adini specifically refers to kartṛtva and bhoktritva. That's an important relationship to remember. Kartṛtva, I do. Bhoktritva, I enjoy the results of what I do. I do so I can enjoy, which directly feeds into the sense of ego, which is what I experience as me. The ego is only concerned with experiencing joy. So in this world, I have to do to get the results, and I evaluate what I do depending on its ROI. So whenever enjoyership is at stake, I stop doing it. Responsibilities is a great example. Just saying the word makes me cringe and resist, right? Responsibilities. The ROI of responsibilities is negligible, so I don't want to do it. Eventually, not doing that responsibility can bring pain and sorrow, so I put in the bare minimum required and do what's convenient, as conveniently as possible. So the ego is the one that runs this equation. And this is my experience. But again, is experience pramana of reality? No. When the Atma Chaitanya is reflected in the BMI, I identify with that kartṛtva entity as perceiver, feeler, and thinker. And the entity is called the ego. And this is who I consider myself to be right now. So here the analogy is given that yatha calanādi, so just as the trembling and etc. of the water, ātmabodha kalpyante'mbugate candre is imagined to be on the reflected moon. So the enlivening nature of Atman is mistaken as doing and enjoying entity. And again, the reason for this mistake is given one more time. And we'll go back to comparing verse 21 and 22. In 21, the word that is given is aviveka, because of not thinking. Here in verse 22, it says ajñāna, due to ignorance. So what's the difference? Between these two verses, we're taught the concept of Maya expressing as avarna and vikshepa, and translated roughly as non-apprehension and misapprehension by Gurudev. So let's take an analogy and run with it for a little bit. If there is a rope and I see a snake, immediately I can accept that, yes, there's a snake. This means that I'm not doing thinking, avivekena. So the snake persists because of the absence of inquiry. Similarly, if there is an Atman and I experience the ego and I accept, yes, I am the ego, that means I'm not inquiring into my own nature. But in the first instance, that snake which I'm seeing can only occur if there is non-apprehension of the rope. The cause of the misapprehension of snake is the non-apprehension of the rope. I can only mistake myself to be the ego if I don't apprehend that I am Atman in the first place. There must be the first instance of ajñāna for the possibility of aviveka to persist. So I'm not apprehending myself as Atman in the first place, which allows the persistence of the misapprehensions of the guna and karma of the stula sharira, the kartṛtva and bhoktritva bhava of the sukshma sharira as being me. So viveka is needed to distinguish the ego from the self, and jnana is to know the rope for the rope, or I am eva atma. So up until now, we've been given statements of fact that atma is satyam, jagat and jiva is mithya, but we may ask, how do we know this for sure? Give me some more logic to convince me of this fact, make it more true. So such logical explanations will be stated going forward, especially starting with verse 23 onwards, and we'll see that next week. So with that, I pass it to Brahmachari Hari.
Good to see everyone after such a long time. Glad to be here. So far, if we look at ātmabodha, we've gone through several concepts that have built on each other to take us to this point that we're at now. Whether it's why even study ātmabodha was the very first topic given. From there, we went to knowledge being the only means to liberation, that there is no other way to get liberation. Like Divyaji pointed out, everything else is merely preparation so that I have that intellectual purity and readiness to ascertain what this knowledge is. And ignorance is the one impediment to knowledge. No other impediment, it's simply that ignorance. And then my equipment was described to me in detail, shown clearly and logically that this equipment that I work with is not me, is finite, is perishable, and therefore cannot be the self. Logically, clearly laid out. And the problem now is given. I take this equipment to be me. And this can be a very frustrated point for a seeker. Because we ask ourselves now, how does erroneous thinking bind me then? What are the ways I catch myself falling for this erroneous thinking? So in Shloka 21, we see adhyasyanti, that it superimposes. And Bhagavan Shri Adi Shankaracharya ji elsewhere gives the definition of adhyasa, atasminstad buddhihi prabhavati vimudhasya tamasa, that whenever I'm overcome by ignorance, I mistake one thing for the other. That's simply what adhyasa is. I mistake what's not real, thinking that it is real. Now it's very interesting to see what we consider real and not, and how we respond to it. There's actually been experiments done on people where there's a class of people who they faint at the sight of blood. You may be one of them. I won't tell you if I am or not, but there are a class of people that faint when they see blood. What's interesting though is, if they're watching a movie that is fiction, they don't faint when they see it there. But if they're watching a news report where they know it's real, they see in real life, or they're watching something where it's a documentary where they know that blood is real, they will faint at that point. So inherently, in the back of their mind, knowing whether it's real or not, whether they realize it or not, has a direct impact on what that reaction is. So knowing what is real and not has a very big influence on how we respond to any situation. So here it's given avivekena. For that person who has a lack of discrimination, that is when this confusion persists. Because at this point for the seeker, faith in Shastra is cultivated. There is trust in that guru that is growing because of the guidance that they're giving. There is intellectual clarity of what the concepts presented. All that is there, yet the reactions I have point to a lack of discrimination. Because like that fake blood, all these fake instances that are going on with an Atma, that still does affect me. And that's what's frustrating. Now, how do we tell that this is happening? Because it isn't verbalized in the way of, I have lack of discrimination, therefore I'm taking my body to be real. We never verbalize things that way. There are different effects that tell us what's going on. For instance, I have a body ailment, say. And suppose I lose a night or two of sleep because of that ailment. Not because of pain that the body is giving, anxiety of what will happen to this body in the future, how will it persist, that's what makes me lose sleep. At that point, that's a clear marker. I'm taking this body to be a very true entity. That's why there's so much anxiety, so much worry about this insignificant body. Clear case of adhyasa going on right there and its effects. And so I pay more attention to what I consider to be real. Now, the drishtanta given here, gagane nīlatādivat, that the blue color on the sky, where science tells me what? Because of the reflection of the oceans, that's why the sky appears blue. Instead, I take that one data point of the sky being blue, and just because my eyes see it, one single data point, I make an assumption. If we look at Srimad Bhagavad Gita, one of the qualities of the tamasic guna is taking one data point when I'm doing any kind of analysis or thinking and considering the whole thing to be true because of that. That quick rush to judgment is tamasic in nature. It can be as silly as, say, I visit New Jersey. I visit one person who's rude to me. And what's the conclusion I come home with? Everyone in Jersey is rude because of that one person that I met. Snap judgments that we make. It's a silly example, but we make so many of those, taking apart to be the whole. And that's nothing but a misconception. So I pay more attention to what I consider to be real. But let's look a little bit further here. what is the effect of that? What is the effect of taking things that are unreal to be real is, if we go back to the 5th shloka, we saw that for a seeker on this path, the method given to really sharpen that intellectual tool to understand the truth is jnana-abhyasa. Constant repetition of this knowledge, going through it again and again in my mind. When I take something like this body to be true, and say an ailment there distracts me from that, it goes from jnana-abhyasa to deha-abhyasa constantly. My whole focus shifts, and therefore I can't focus on what must be focused on. So the effect of this interrupts my jnana-abhyasa. So this body that's perishable, I consider it to be real at that point. I keep preserving it with the help of sense objects. I fall for that trap. And it's like a silkworm. If you see a silkworm, it's bound in the cocoon, right? Did someone come and bind that silkworm? No, it made its own threads and bound itself in that cocoon. That's what I'm doing to myself this way. So that's on that first level of how does this erroneous thinking bind me? What is that adhyasa? We look in this 22nd shloka, then there's one more step given here. The idea of kartṛtva. That idea of agency, that I am doing this, I am doing that. One of the most interesting subjects in the field of economics is game theory. It's the science of decision making. One classic example that's given is the prisoner's dilemma. Say two friends commit a crime, right? Divyaji and I robbed a bank, say. Two best friends commit a crime. No, it wouldn't really happen. So the cops interrogate the two people separately for a specific reason. Where if both persons say they're innocent and their stories check out, they both go free. But if one of them panics and they say the other person did it and I'm innocent, that person gets 10 years in jail while this person goes free. So sitting in those individual jail cells, both these people are sweating bullets about it. That what is the other person going to say? I have to beat the person before they incriminate me. I have to say it about them so that they get the sentence I don't. All of this goes through their mind. Now, that's the same kind of prisoner's dilemma that we're stuck in all the time, isn't it? Where when that kartṛtva is so strong, going back to that same idea of jnana-abhyasa being broken, instead of jnana-abhyasa, my abhyasa all the time is now on karya-karana, cause and effect with everything. Constantly, because I have so much nishtha, so much determination in what my actions are and their consequences, my focus completely turns to, if I do this, what will happen here? And that constant scheming is completely draining and incredibly debilitating. All my energy goes there. Where's the time? Where's the need for jnana-abhyasa? If I think this is what's real, this is what makes me happy. And the sad truth here is, and Bhagavan Shri Adi Shankaracharya points to this in Viveka-Chudamani, that I'm clinging to situations to make me happy at this point by my decision making. And the truth is, there's always up and down. There is no permanent state of calmness if I'm focused this way. Samsara always goes up and down like a sinking ship. No other way to look at it. So kalpyante'mbugate, that I attribute all of these decision makings for this finite equipment, I put it all on the self, saying that this is what is important, this is what really makes me happy, this is what I must try to control. And the drishtanta given here, ātmabodha candre calanādi, that just as the moon is reflected in that trembling water, then I really think that the moon is the one that's shaking. And so behaving as though the different states of my intellect were the nature of the self and now rising and sinking, I believe that to be real at that point. And that's because I don't understand what this intellect is made for. Getting this very human birth is great in itself. And using it for the wrong purposes of scheming like this, focusing on action and what happens from it, I'm doing myself a disservice. It's like getting a wonderful axe, a nice strong axe that can cut any tree down. Instead, I use it as a fly swatter, can opener. This is what I use it for. Where it's meant for something much bigger, yet I use it for the pettiest of things and not understanding its value. If I've been given this human intellect and I'm worried about actions and what happens from them all the time, I'm using my axe for opening a can opener. That's all I'm doing. Where this intellect is actually the tool, the vehicle to understand this truth of jnana-abhyasa. And if it's deha-abhyasa all the time, or abhyasa of karya-karana, that's the disservice I do myself. That's all I have, Swami.
Thank you, Hari. There's one example that he took was the blueness of the sky is because of the reflection of the oceans. It is the other way around. It is the tongue of the slip. So we're coming back into this after a long time. So I understand. If we take our attention to the earlier shloka, the 20th shloka, that is where we have the very crux of what he is going to discuss in the next few shlokas very clearly given. He says, Atma Chaitanyam Ashritya Dehendriya Manodhyaha. Deha, Indriya, Mana, Dhi. These are by nature, if you go back to our ātmabodha, they are the result of Panchikaranam and Apanchikrita Panchamahabhuta. Meaning, they are made up of matter. Deha, Indriya, Mana, Buddhi. All of this is nothing but made up of matter. 5 elements. And what is the nature of these 5 elements? That it does not have Chaitanya-Tattvam. It does not have conscious principle. The awareness is not there. It is jada, inert by nature. So many people have a tough time grasping. You mean mind and intellect also is jada, inert? Yes. Without the touch of that Atma Chaitanya, Buddhi cannot, and if Buddhi cannot, Mana or any Indriya cannot function in its own field. So, what does the Chaitanya-Tattva, what does it do? It does not do anything. Just its presence is sufficient. Sannihita matrena. No, it is not there in the shloka. I am referring to it. Sannihita matrena meaning that closeness, close proximity of it is sufficient. And we have seen the principle of induction as though that it reflects into the buddhi, and that reflected consciousness has the similar quality like the origin or the source, which is the Chaitanya-Tattva. Borrowing this from that reflected consciousness, the buddhi feels enlivened. It percolates this particular aspect, this guna of the reflected consciousness to the next layer, which is the mind. The mind feels enlivened. Then through the mind is the gross body, deha, indriya. The indriya is still subtle because there we are talking about the faculty of the physicality of what we see as eyes, ears, nose, mouth, etc. Both jnanendriya and karmendriya. They feel enlivened. All of this is borrowed. When we do Panchakosha Viveka, this knowledge has to be understood, this knowledge has to be contemplated, and this knowledge has to precipitate in such a way that whenever I am functioning, in my functioning, it is seen very distinctly, including in my thought, word, and action. That is what it should help us in. So Bhagavan Adi Shankaracharya ji takes one layer at a time and makes that case for us to understand and grasp. So the first and foremost that he takes up for that discussion is in the 21st shloka. He says, Dehendriya. Dehendriya, what do they do? Guna karmani. So the deha and indriya, which is the deha is the annamaya kosha, then the indriya is the pranamaya kosha. So these two, now they start expressing with gunas. What are the gunas? Guna meaning something as attribute that it can describe. So deha has certain guna. There is definitely sthulatva, that it is grass. Then there is thin grass, fat grass, tall, short, white, brown, black, the color. All of these are gunas. When we say, I am this color, this height, just even in that interaction of making that statement, there is an abhyasa happening. There is a practice that is happening unconsciously, strengthening this bodily identification and firming it in our understanding. That is verily called the adhyasa, superimposition. Come again, Swamiji, what do you mean by superimposition? Whenever we say, I am tall, I am short, I am brown, I am black, I am white, I am whatever are the attributes, what is this I? I is that Shuddha Chaitanya. And that Shuddha Chaitanya does not have any such attributes. Then whose attributes are these? These attributes are the attributes of the body, deha. I don't know why, but there is maybe because I just came back from a trip. There is this picture of picking up your baggage. Almost everybody has a similar kind of a baggage and it looks black. So I usually pack in some weird color which stands out, so that as soon as it hits the conveyor belt, I know that is my bag, that color is my bag. Now the difference is when I say that is my bag versus that blue bag is my bag versus I am brown or black or white, I am tall or short. What am I doing? With respect to the bag, the blueness of the bag, I am not attributing it to myself. The blue is on the conveyor belt. No, I don't say that. But with respect to this body, that apadita lakshana, the superimposition, adhyasa, is very, very strong. How strong? So strong that, see, when somebody says something which you are not, and they are making a tall claim of it, if somebody says you are a liar, but you know you were not lying, you would stand up all hurt. Why? It is not true. Okay, understood. If it is not true, we feel hurt, therefore we stand up and we argue. Now, the other side of the coin is, supposing if somebody came to me and said, Swamiji, you are bald. How dare you say that I am bald? What, is it not true? There also we feel hurt. I may be, but you calling it out doesn't feel nice. So bald doesn't feel nice being called bald. A fat doesn't feel nice when being called as fat. We become chewy muyi, touch me not kind of a thing. How dare you say that? Now, where is the reaction coming from? That reaction is the very result of our attachment to this body, which is strengthened by my own vyavahara. My vyavahara, my very statements that I make. And somebody says, oh, I didn't realize you're tall for an Indian. Looking, I said, what to do? Blessed with a body that is tall. Versus, yeah, I know, I'm tall. Do you see the difference? One is from the standpoint that, yes, that is something which belongs to me, which I'm using. Versus, I know I am it. At the deha level, that tadatmya, that oneness, there are several techniques that our scriptures speak about. One such very healthy, very helpful one is called upasana. Upasana of the Ishtadaiva, where you are removing this identity and placing the identity of that Ishtadaiva, whether it is Krishna, Rama, Shiva, Ganesha, whoever, or Devi, whoever it is. When we are doing that upasana, we are replacing it. Therefore, you might have observed, if you have taken the, say, mantra and the puja paddhati, before you start, there is this process of the anganyasa, karanyasa, hridayanyasa invocations. Supposing you are chanting Vishnu Sahasranama or Lalita Sahasranama, or for that matter, even Rudram. There's a whole method, and that method is, the idea is that upasana, you're replacing this conviction, replacing this idea that I am this conglomerate called body, mind, intellect, with the thought that it is Bhagavan and I'm merely his sevaka. And what is the best result of this upasana? That this tadatmya, this oneness, this identity, to be ripped apart. To be, the reason I say ripped apart is, it is like a band-aid. How would you want, supposing there is a small cut and you put a band-aid, how would you want that band-aid to be removed from your arm? Slowly, or झटक से निकाल दिया. So it has to be ripped. The similar is with this adhyasa. And the second tool that our Mahatmas have given is, when we are studying such concepts, one thing is an academic study to understand the word, understand the word's meaning, and put a cognitive sentence together which makes sense, and to present exactly as that which has been given by the shloka. I would call that as a mere vomiting process. You just put together something and done. But now it has to be regurgitated. Manana is a process of consuming that which I am doing as Shravana, and then sit down and contemplate upon it. What do they mean when they say, I am not this body? This contemplation is what helps us when we go to the subtler mantras or pointers that are given. When Bhagavan Adi Shankaracharya ji says in Nirvana Shatkam, Mano buddhyahankara chittani naham. We put it to a good tune and then nice ambience, and then we swing to that beautiful tune of the melody of that, but all that is good. That is feel good factor. Do kodi ka nahi hai wo, that feel good factor. When you get past that feel good factor, that which it is pointing, mana, buddhi, chitta, ahankarani, na aham. That which this shloka is pointing here in Atmabodha, manana when done, when the higher pointers are given, my conviction, my clarity takes to that realm immediately. That is called chintana. That is called the manana process, where you are churning it in all possible angles to understand that this deha is jada. Its attributes are restricted only to it. I cannot be attributing it to myself. So somebody saw me very recently, we opened up in person, right? Swami ji, थोड़े मोटे हो गए आप. And his wife was there and she nudged him and said, क्या बोल रहे हो? लेकिन शरीर है, उसका धर्म मोटा पतला होता रहता है. It is sharira dharma, and you feed it well, it fattens. You don't feed it well, it reduces. But it is sharira dharma to remember that. When somebody points that and you look at yourself and say, true. But again, it is true, but still I feel hurt. What are you feeling hurt about? Where is that hurt being coming from? That is where this knowledge has to be applied in. Now, moving forward, with this sthula, guna, karma, is it deha and indriya. Indriya is the organs, its faculty, its capacity. Or you can hear better, you can smell better, you can, yes, my hearing is good. I can hear better versus my hearing is good. There's a subtle difference. After 40, my eyes seem to have a problem without these. Unless until I put this, my eyes cannot see clearly versus I cannot see it clearly. Do you observe the small subtle difference there? That abhyasa has to go into picture. Am I getting across? Otherwise, what happens? Gagane nīlatādivat, that color that which we see in the sky. What color do we see in sky? The blue color. Now, science has explained to us that the particles in the atmosphere absorb all kinds of ranges of colors from the light, and it cannot absorb the blue color, and that blue left color, that which is left behind, is what we assume as the color of the sky. But does the sky really have any color? No, the sky doesn't have any color. But it is adhyasa. And we get poetically inspired. नीले नीले अंबर पर. इसके बाद नहीं गाऊंगा बस. But is it really Neela? Is it really blue? We know for a fact it is not, but we see. Therefore, in the Pramana Shastra, Pramakaranam, the right means of knowledge, seeing and what we comprehend through seeing cannot be taken as very much the reality. So too here, this adhyasa can be removed. I've given 2 steps. One is mentioned here, the other is the purpose of upasana, which I mentioned earlier. Now, going to the next shloka, let me put a disclaimer before I begin. In the rest of the scriptures that we study, we find that the attribute always that is described of the buddhi is kartṛtva bhoktritva. And what is of the mana? Mana is the raga, dvesha, ityadi is the layer of the mana. But the peculiarity of this ātmabodha, Adi Shankaracharya ji has put this one under the mana, and in the next shloka he talks about the raga, dvesha, ityadi as the buddhi. So that is the disclaimer. थोड़ा सा ऊपर नीचे हो गया है, but get the concept. You ask me why? I have tried checking several other bhashyas on ātmabodha. They also continue with the same, so I'll leave it at that. पर है थोड़ा सा difference. I'm just highlighting that. Now, the adhyasa of guna and karma in this particular layer called the manomaya kosha. The manomaya kosha, as described here, kartṛtva and bhoktritva. It's a feedback loop. Why do I do what I do? Because I love the result of it and the indulgence in it. I can enjoy the result of it. Bhoktritva. Now, as the bhoktritva strengthens, it urges me, it pushes me, it whips me into action, into similar pattern of what has yielded the result, and that result I seem to be liking. Isn't it? Whether it is the music that I hear, the food that I eat, the comfort of what kind of bed. When couples very entertainingly argue right in front of you, you get a lot of insight. I'm talking from my parents' side, time onwards. It is like invariably one of them likes a harder bed, the other likes a softer bed. One of them likes, back in India it was fan or not fan. One of them likes a cooler environment or a climate. The other likes a hotter environment. It has to be to that particular tune. Now, I'll tell you my own experience. So when, say, I am cooking something, inadvertently by practice, my habit of the taste buds acclimatize to higher spice level, inadvertently my hand goes to that. Now I have to remember there are two other poor souls that have to survive on it and they cannot handle it. All of this nuances that goes in every single habit. Why am I stuck in that particular mode of why I do in its repeatability? The coffee has to be in that temperature. I know of people that drink straight from the stove into the glass, from the glass into their, I wouldn't even say mouth, into their pipeline. Oh, in Madras, Tamil Nadu and other places, they'll do this 1 mile and then directly done. That will not even touch their lip. Straight down into the pipeline. Garam, garam. And if it is little less temperature, no. And the funny thing, I've seen this in as young a kid as 7-8 month old. When you start feeding them, I saw thoda thanda ho jaye na khana. I will start refusing to accept anything into the mouth. You warm the same thing up and then, Ore baapre. So specific is the demand. Why are we so now list out as to what are these nuanced specifications that makes me me? All of that come under this. And if it doesn't match, shuru. Distress signal goes out, anxiety signals go out, frustration signals go out, irritation comes out. Why? It is not to my taste, it is not to my liking, it is not to. These are the comfort zones that we have to identify to get over. Otherwise, any movement, because of our attachment, any shake, any shiver in this layer, the shiver is felt, I am going through it. The dissatisfaction in my karma, the dissatisfaction with the result, that it doesn't match. There is anger, irritation. Or if it is not given in time, there is impatience. Constantly. To be able to separate it out and watch our own antakarana randomly behave. And I carry that as though it is my attribute. To be able to stand aside and watch that mind go up and down with these calculations. When the moment the mind understands that it is being observed, sab nautanki band. All this dramatics, it is put aside, put to rest. Otherwise, a simple shake here and the whole personality is like, oh my God, I am disturbed. I am agitated. I am irritated. And the example very beautifully given is the calanādi karma is happening in the water. Like, when there is a ripple-less lake and there is beautiful moon, full moon reflecting there. And if the moon is red in color and that is reflecting, and suddenly there is ripples on the surface, it almost feels like the moon has been cut into pieces. Can the moon be really cut into pieces? Similarly, this Atma Chaitanya does not get any impact. If there is any impact and chalana, it is only in that manovritti. And that manovritti can happen only when I, the Atma Chaitanya, because of its sannidhya, because of its close proximity, is providing that sentiency, energy for it to even move. That which is borrowing something from me, how can it turn around to impact me? That is called delusion. How beautifully he is going layer by layer. To give it more comprehensiveness, he further goes into the buddhi, which we will see in our next class on Tuesday. If you have any questions, feel free. Do not hesitate to put those questions on the group and I'll try to answer it. Thank you all for joining. Let us conclude with Shanti Patha. It's good to be back. Nice to see all of you. Let's continue this. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah, Sarve Santu Niramayaha, Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu, Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet, Asato Ma Sadgamaya, Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya, Mrityorma Amritangamaya. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate, Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavasishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.